Get it in review and then go from there. We have been studying this book, and we stated it's a book of balance. And you remember some of the balances we talked about. The word balance, as stated in the New American Heritage Dictionary, is a figurative weighing device capable of determining the outcome of events, better known as life hanging in the balance. You know, life hanging in the balance, events, our lives, our Christian lives. Those are non-Christians. Their life hanging in the balance is what we're looking at here. A stable state of characterized by cancellation of the fall forces by equal opposing forces. This is balance. Like darkness and night. You know, there's an equal balance there. There's an equal amount of time for darkness and there's an equal amount of time for daylight. We see in the creation of the world. So there's balance there. The difference is magnitude between opposing forces or influences, such as good and evil. Now, we would want more balance in good and evil. We wouldn't want more evil than we would good, unless you're an evil person. But we as Christians and mankind would like to have more good than evil in our life. We'd like to have better health and sickness in our life. We may like to have a better job in our life than a lesser job that help us sustain this life. And as we look at balance of life in light of the scriptures, we're going to see the word duty. And the word duty is an act or a course of action that is exacted on one by his position, a social custom, law, or religion. So what is our duty? What is your duty? Duty is a moral obligation. Duty is a function of work. If I would ask you, what is the duty of man? And before you answer this, because this is not a trick question, but if I ask you, what is the duty of man? Many of you would say what?
Fear God and keep His commandments.
Fear God and keep His commandments. And that's exactly what I thought you would say. But if you would, let's turn to Ecclesiastes 2, verse 24. Because as we think about duty, there's the word duty and the whole duty of man. There's two different parts of duty. But whenever most people say, what is the duty of man, we go to that verse, which is good, and that's proper. But let's think of what duty of man is. It says in Ecclesiastes 2, verse 24, and let me suggest that the duty of man is, there is nothing better for a man that he should eat and drink, that he should make himself, his soul, enjoy the goods of his labor. That's our duty. Eat and drink and enjoy the goods of your labor. And again, it's stated in Ecclesiastes 5, verse 18, and it is good and fit to eat and drink, and to enjoy all one's labor, in which he toils under the sun during the few years of his life, which God has given him. For this is his reward. And I would suggest that is the duty of man. And the next thing we'll look at here, what is the whole duty of man? And Harold, you quoted that, which says,
Fear God and keep His commandments.
fear God and keep His commandments. So there's two parts of duty here. You know, we have a function, we have moral obligation. We work, and our duty may be imposed upon us for who we are, where we're at, the position you're in, or social circumstances, by law or by religion. But the whole duty of man is fear God and keep His commandments. For this is the whole duty of man. Now, can you have a whole duty of something being done and only do it partially? If you have work to do and you do partial work, let's say you change the tire on your car, then you get the jack out, jack the car up, take the tire off, then get in the car and drive off. Have you done your whole work? Not unless you put the tire back on, put the jack away, secure it. So think about your duty and your whole duty of man. Our whole duty of man is to fear God and keep His commandments. And that is rightly so. Note the difference in the whole duty of man is to fear God and keep His commandments, and duty of man. The duty of man, we eat, we drink, we enjoy the goods of our labor, for this is our reward. And then the whole duty of mankind is to fear God and keep His commandments. And why should we do this? It says, for God shall bring every work into judgment, with every secret thing, whether it is good or bad. So what we're talking about here is we're doing our whole duty or man, or doing our duty, or doing our everyday life. Things we do, we will be held accountable for in judgment. If you turn to Revelation 20 and verse 12, and many of you probably know this, where John says, and I saw the dead, small and great, standing before God, and the books were opened. And another book was opened, which is the book of life. And the dead were judged out of the book, according to their works. So are we going to give an account for our works? The scriptures say we will. My duty at work as an aircraft mechanic, I have to give an account for that. My boss expects an 8-hour day of work for 8 hours pay. And I know there's times when we're not busy all 8 hours a day, and it's probably not one of us is continuous morning to sunset, 8 hours a day, doing everything you need to do in accordance with your job. And that's okay, because I don't think we could handle that. I remember grandparents, when they'd get up in the morning, 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, to go milk cows, work in the fields, plant, sow, go buy stuff at the grocery store, come home, and Grandma would cook meals all day long, and then late at night, we'd get ready to go back to bed. That was a day's work. And there wasn't no such thing as 8 hours. They had been thankful to have 8 hours a day. I mean, it was like 24/7, 12, 15-hour days, hoeing peanuts, picking corn, planting the garden, taking care of the cattle and stuff like that. And yet they were rewarded for the labor of their hands. Remember, our duty is to work hard, and God will reward us for the labor of our hands. So duty, an example of our duty, and our obligation, which is basically a command, one of them would be, have no other God before me. As a Christian, can we have another God before God? Can we do idol worship? No. This is a command. Have no other gods before me. Husbands, love your wife. That's a command. That's our duty. Husbands should love their wives. Wives should love their husbands. It goes hand in hand. There's a balance there. If the wife portrays more love to the family and the husband than the husband portrays to the wife, is there an unbalance? And a lot of guys I know don't pay enough attention to the wives. You know, in this day and time, women do a lot, men do a lot, but I perceive and still perceive that women do an extreme lot, more than men. They're up at the break of dawn, fixing our meals, preparing today, you know, maybe starting laundry early, cleaning the house, dusting, you know. And then about 9:30 or 10 o'clock, she may ask you, would you take the trash out? I got to take the trash out. Now, how many men have said that? If you just take a few minutes and look around what she's done, and she's prepared the house, she's prepared the food, she's done the laundry, she's got the kids up, got them dressed, got them off to school, standing out there at the bus stop, and we can't take out the trash. Shame on us. And men take out the trash. And it's okay. And the wife may also take out the trash. And then I feel real bad. I'm sorry, dear, I've got to take out the trash. And we should. But part of our duties, children, obey your parents. This is a command. It's an obligation. It's children's duty to parents to obey your parents. I had a guy tell me once, I brought these little kids into the world and I can take them out. You know. I said, now wait a minute here. Well, they won't mind, you know, things like that. That was a Bill Cosby statement in 1970 something. When Theo was acting up or whatever, he told him, look, son, I brought you into this world and I can take you out. So straighten up your act. If a man fails to work, and we talked about a sluggard last week, he shall not eat. You know, to me, that should be a command. If you fail to do something, you shouldn't be rewarded for it. If you're planning on working, you should eat. If you're not planning on working, you shouldn't eat. and especially for what you're working for, is food. A duty of man is to repent and be baptized. That's a command. Walk faithfully unto death. That's a command. That's not a suggestion. He didn't suggest we walk faithfully. He demands us to walk faithfully. He commands us to walk faithfully. There are other duties of man that maybe you ever think of, such as one I can think of again, is an honest day's work is an honest day's pay. There's balance in there. I was going to look this up, but I failed to, but there was a situation in the scriptures where a man needed somebody to work in the field. And a guy came early in the morning, he worked off from dusk till dawn. Another guy came 2 or 3 hours later, and he worked till dawn. Another guy came after half the day was over and worked till dawn, or till the evening, and the day was over. And then they all went in to get their pay. Well, the first one had put 8 or 9 hours, whatever it was, into the field that day, expected to get his pay, which he did, as a penny or whatever it was for that day's labor, whatever it could have been. And yet the person who worked half a day got the same pay. Then the person who only worked a quarter a day got the same pay. And what do you think happened? The one who worked all day, what did he do? He grumbled. But did you not contract for a day's pay? Or for work that day? And if you have, why should you grumble? You put in for an all-day job. You worked all day. You got there early. You put in for half a day's work. You worked half a day. You got paid. You worked a quarter a day. You got paid for a quarter a day. Now, there are those who may see injustice in that, but the person that owned the field, he didn't make a difference in what he was paying. It's his field. It's his money. So we have no complaints to argue about that. So do you see these are not suggestions but commands that we have and an obligation to God out of duty. Everything we do is an obligation to God out of duty. Christian duty. Christian walk of life. In the balance of life, we do not want the scales just to set off good and evil. You know, we don't want it to just be straight across, like a straight line like this. I've looked at the scales. I thought about that last week when I said that. Scales of balance, you want them to be proper weight, so they meter out what's due on one side and what's due on the other side. But in a sinful life, we want the scales of life to tilt towards God, not just be parallel and trying to offset good and evil. Because as they're tilting towards God, you have a good relationship with God. If we're just walking the narrow road here, straight line, and I thought about that a couple of weeks ago when I mentioned walking in the light as he is in the light and has fellowship with one another. There are those who want to be on the outside of the edge of the light and do all I can and still be in the light, you know, taking a chance, risky, whatever. And I said then they need to be back in the center of the light. Because the light will reprove our actions, our deeds, and it will search our hearts, and it will judge us. So in the realm of sin, we want the balance to be tilted in God's favor and for our favor towards God. And we say why? Because there's consequences of sin. Remember Revelations 2:20 or 20 and 12? The books of life were opened. They were read. We give an account for what we've done in this life. And we want the goodness, the charitable things we've done, the love, the compassion, the kindness, the joy, all that to exceed that of malice, anger, hatred, murder, and a number of other sins that we could have got caught up in. In Acts 4:12 it says, "Neither is there salvation in any other, for there is no other name under heaven given among men, whereby we must be saved." So as we look at our duty, we look at our obligation, and we look at balance, we must come to Christ to have that balance. A non-Christian, you know, we may see a non-Christian and they may think they have the world by the tail, as the expression said, and everything's going their way. But they will have some of the same pitfalls we will have as Christians. You know, they may have a broken home. They may have a sick child. They may have hail damage on their house just like we've had. The difference is God is blessing Christians, and he can't really bless sinners unless they're in the fold. But yet we see them being blessed, and we wonder why. But God truly blesses those who works with their hands. And as we think of sin of the flesh, we talked about idleness. I'm going to talk a little bit about idleness and anger. We must be able to balance sin and righteousness. That is a duty of us. You know, it's hard. I know it's hard. If the world finds out you're a Christian, you will be persecuted. Not hung from a tree or nailed to a cross or tortured over an open fire. But you may not get the promotion or job you wanted. You may not have all the friends you'd like to have as a Christian. You may not run with the crowd, the worldly crowd. And you may even feel like, I'm left out. But if you have one Christian friend, and I know many of us have more than one, but if you just have one, we're truly blessed. There's strength in numbers, and everybody says, what number's 100? No. There's strength in one friend. Because that one friend can edify you, he can encourage you, he can build you up, he can run around with you. You won't be alone. And how sad would it be if on your dying day, on your deathbed, that there be no friend around? And that happens to a lot of people. So we must remember, it says, remember, my son, if sinners entice thee, consent thou not. That's Proverbs 1 verse 10. And we're talking back there in chapter 1 verse 10. That Solomon's telling his son, if sinners entice you to go do this, to weigh and lay for someone and to rob them or kill them, don't do that. You know. And sin may be described as anything that is offensive to God and human and harmful to mankind. So sins, anything that's offensive to God, and there's a host of things that are offensive to God, and a host of things which are harmful to mankind. Just consider those things sin. That's what they are. The term is variously defined in the Scriptures as rebellion. Sin is also rebellion. Would somebody turn to Deuteronomy 9, verse 7, if you don't mind doing that? Chapter 9, verse 7. We're talking here about Israel when it passed through Jordan, 10th year there, whatever. And in verse 7 there, 9 verse 7, somebody read that. We're talking about rebellion. Sin is rebellion against God.
I've got it, Billy.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Remember, do not forget how you provoked the Lord your God to wrath in the wilderness from the day that you left the land of Egypt until you arrived in this place. You have been rebellious against the Lord.
Okay, so what have the people done here? They provoked God, and they were rebellious. And it didn't just happen today. He said, since you came out of the land of Egypt, going to the promised land, these people have been doing this. So it's become a way of life with them. And then it says, transgressions and fragrant disobedience is sin. Missing the mark or failing is considered sin. And we see that in Romans 3:23, where it says, for all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. We miss the mark because mankind is sinful. Evil desires or reaching after pleasures and all unrighteousness is considered sin. And the concept of sin is, of course, to man's free will. You thought about that? Sin comes because we have a free will to choose. You know, God doesn't dictate that you're not going to be a sinner. You know, we have a choice. to obey the gospel or not to obey the gospel. Because man is to choose among a number of alternatives, and because he is conscious of his decisions and their consequences, he is responsible for his actions. So here's these people who brought God to wrath. Why? Because they rebelled. They're conscious of their situation, but yet they're being told in the scriptures, you're a rebellious people. You're going to pay for your consequences. How much longer did it take them to get to the promised land? How many got in? You know, another 400 years. Only a couple people went in after all was said and done. So we have to be responsible for our actions. As we look back to Genesis, even all the way back to Genesis, and I want to bring this, and everybody knows the story about Genesis. In the beginning, God created heaven and earth. In chapter 6 over there, or actually chapter 3, verse 23 and 24, Adam and Eve paid for their sin and their consequences. They were put out of the garden by God. Chapter 3, verse 23, verse 24. Therefore Jehovah God sent him forth from the garden of Eden to till the ground whence he was taken. So he drove the man out and placed in the east of the garden the cherubim and the flame of the sword, which turned their way to keep him away from the tree of life. Adam and Eve sinned. They were put out of the garden. If you would turn to chapter 6 of Genesis. Chapter 6, 1 through 13. If you want to follow along on there, just open the Bibles to that. And it came to pass, when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God saw that the daughters of men, they were fair, and they took them wives, and all which they chose. And the Lord said, My spirit shall not always strive with man, for that he is also flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that were the sons of God came unto the daughters of men, and they bore children. The same that became mighty men, and were of old and of renown. Verse 5. And God saw the wickedness of men was great in the earth, and that every imagination of their thought of their hearts was only evil continuously. And it repented God that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him at his heart. And the Lord said, I will destroy man whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast and every creeping thing, and the fowls of the air, for it repented me that I have made them. Now Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. These are the generations of Noah. And he had 3 sons. Verse 10. And the earth was corrupt before God, and the earth was filled with violence. And God looked up on the earth, and behold, it was corrupt. For all the flesh was corrupted his way, for all the flesh had corrupted his ways upon the earth. And God said unto Noah, The end of all flesh is come before me, for the earth is filled with violence through them, and behold, I will destroy them with the earth. There's an interesting part there. And God looked up on the earth. Nobody had to tell God there that people were corrupt, that the imaginations of their heart was continuously evil. God saw it. God sees us every day. He knows our hearts. He says in verse 5, God saw the weaknesses of man, and it was great. Not just a little bit of wickedness, but great wickedness, evil. And it repented the Lord, he made the earth. And it grieved him at his heart. It grieved God's heart for the sinfulness of mankind. But there's little hope. Noah found grace. Noah walked with God. Noah begot sons, a new generation. The earth was corrupt before God. God looked upon the earth, and it was corrupt. Nobody had to tell him it was corrupt. And God said unto Noah, the end of all flesh is come before me, and the earth is filled with violence. And behold, I will destroy them with the earth, mankind. A very sad time in history. But yet you know the outcome of that, and I know the outcome of that. Noah and his household were saved. God regenerated and populated the earth, and we're here today. So we can grieve God to a point where it hurts his heart if we have sin in our life. Consequences of man's sins lets us come to conclude that all men will give an account for the things done in this life, as we saw in Revelation 20, verse 12, when we were talking about the books of life and judgment. If you have a comment on any of those questions or statements I've made or something I say, your comments, observations, or remarks, you're welcome to make them. So boldly speaking, there are three types of sins I'm going to address. Offenses against God and authority, offenses against mankind, offense against one's own self or in his own nature. In one sense, all of these wrongs are specifically directed against God and nature, or God's will. These words include under the Old Testament particularly such sins as worshiping idols, violating the Lord's Sabbath, blaspheming, and disobedience of divine laws. Sin against others, whether neighbors or strangers, would include acts of cruelty, violence, injustice, deceit, fraud, misrepresentation or lying, and more subtle things such as contempt and arrogancy. In the third category may be listed some sins of indolence and filthiness of the body or mind as an offense primary against oneself. Though unless one lives like an ancient hermit in a cave on a mountain apart from society, he will offend other people. When the Apostle Paul warned against fornication, he argued, every sin that man does is without the body, but he that committeth fornication sins against his own body. That's 1 Corinthians 6, verse 18. He also spoke of the perverted man and abusers of themselves in 1 Corinthians 6, 9, who received in their body the recompense of their errors which was done. So again, these people will receive their just reward for what they've done. So now let us discuss some sins that especially affect the life and influence of an individual. These sins may, for convenience, be called the sins of the flesh, or personal sins, or generally sins in excess. And one of those sins that we talked about in the past, we'll talk about again, is called idleness, the sin of irresponsibility. Idleness in small part does not only, idleness in small doses is not only enjoyable but beneficial. I didn't say you couldn't be idle. I said in small parts. It could be enjoyable. We need a break sometimes. You know, talking about those people working sun up, sun down, they needed a break. A little rest. The leisure that we prize so much as holidays or vacation is pleasurable because it is a break of the daily routine or labors or responsibilities. The change from work to play or recreation is good for the body and for the mind. Let me say that again. A change from work or responsibilities is good for the body and mind. We need a break. You've heard of workaholics? Work. I have been called a workaholic. People tell me I work way too much. I feel like I need to work. God gives me something to do, and I work. And I can't remember the last time I took a vacation, folks. I'll go ahead and admit that to you. But I do take vacations, maybe sparingly, less than most people. But it's okay to work, but we need a break. And this is not a sin of idleness when we take a break, or when we're regenerized or recharged. We need to take a break, be revigored, brought back, refreshed, ready to go, work again. Isn't that what we do? But we should enjoy our time. It's a change of sense of activities, the very frequent or holidays like I talked about. That break is kind of a fruit which we earn by hard work. Even Christ was a busy person, and he saw the need for taking a little time off. When the apostles came in from a journey and reported all that they had been doing, the Master Christ said, "Come ye yourself apart into a desert place and rest a while." Mark 6:31. No, we must note this. They were out doing work on a journey, a toilsome work. They were probably busy, missionary work, whatever they're doing here. They came in, reported what we had done, and Christ himself said, "Take a break. Rest. Re-energize yourself." However, the labor came first, and then the work. It wasn't the rest, then the work, because that is a form of idleness we'll talk about. Idleness is shirking one's duty, resting when one should be working, sleeping when the sun is up or high. Idleness, the idle person, he that will not work, neither let him eat. I stated that earlier. An example of this is in the scriptures in Proverbs 6:9-11, and it states, "How long wilt thou sleep, O sluggard? Will thou arise? When wilt thou rise out of thy sleep? Yet a little sleep, a little slumber, so shall thy power become as a robber, and thy want as a armed man." Proverbs 6:9. Now, as we talk about that in this passage, which admonishes the sluggard to take a lesson from the industrial ant. We talked about the ant last week and in Wednesday night class and Marty's class also. The little ant. The very spirit of this slugger, is caught in the language here. The spirit of that person is the lazy person. He has been sleeping and tries to justify his behavior by repeated words like a little sleep. I'm just taking a little sleep. I'm just goofing off a little bit. I'm just folding my hands a little bit. But we can't justify being slackers or non-productive even a little bit when we should be about God's work 100%. Whether it's in a field, to plow, to provide food for ourselves, or family, or for others, or for a community, or for a nation. We must be diligent at it. So what is wrong with one taking ease with all others are? And we see that what's wrong about that is it fails to provide for oneself, or in some interests, let me say this again. It fails to provide for one's self, or in some instances, for one's family. Second, the sluggard wants his share of food and the comfort of the home, but at someone else's expense. That's what's wrong with it. He wants everything everybody else has, but at their expense, not at his labor. So he shifts the burden of responsibility to others. And thirdly, the sluggard may be an imposter or an immature son or daughter who stays in the nest long before it's time to go because he don't want to realize the reality of the world, of having his house, paying his bills, or whatever. There's a time for us all to grow up. Idleness, the sin of idleness is in itself selfishness, because we want to ride on the skirt tails of somebody else, so the saying goes, and have what they have without putting forth effort. Idleness will cause you to lose self-esteem and self-respect, and the self-esteem and self-respect of others. Idleness will bring poverty, hungry, and you could lose your property. The scripture says, I went by the field of the sluggard and by the vineyard of the man void of understanding, and lo, it was grown up over with thorns. The face thereof was covered with nettles, and the stones thereof was broken down the wall. This depressing picture leads us naturally to a moral lesson. You know, the lesson here is, if you have work to do, if you have a field, if you have a wall, and you have work to do, you should take care of it. God has blessed you with it, so he can bountifully increase your abundance of that. So therefore, the lessons for the idle is to do what you have to do and let God give the increase. I realize the first bell rang here, which I'm not going to get through all this. I'm going to have to bring this up later. Any comments, questions, or observations on that right there? As we think about idleness, we think about duty, we think about obligation, we think about balance of our lives as a Christian walk.
Billy, when you're trying to balance yourself physically, you have to move fast. Because you can't stay unbalanced very long.
Mm-hmm.
Gravity works against you. So you got to move fast to right yourself. I think that's one of the benefits of Proverbs, is that they're so easily recalled. I made just a brief list here. For example, if I said spare the rod, what's the rest of it? Anybody know?
Spoil the child.
Spoil the child. Pride goes before destruction or a fall. A soft answer
Turns away
wrath. Iron sharpens.
Iron sharpens iron.
Iron sharpens iron. What does that have reference to? So,
Pardon? What was the reference to iron sharpen iron? Iron sharpen iron. Go ahead, Marty.
okay, y'all don't know that one? Well, I figured we'd get to one eventually.
So a man sharpens himself is what they say.
Okay, two friends sharpen each other. One man sharpens his friend. How about fear of the Lord is the
Beginning of knowledge.
beginning of wisdom or beginning of knowledge. It says both.
Yeah.
In other words, these are things, there's 31 chapters of stuff that you can just recall quickly. And it's great stuff because you don't have to try to remember, okay, what did that say about pride? No, you know what it says about pride. You know what it says about sparing the rod. You know what it says about all this stuff. And the more familiar we become with these things, the less we'll be out of balance. Because we'll be able to right ourselves almost automatically. There are a lot of things that we learn because we had good parents.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of what they taught us is in here. We just discover it later. Oh, that's in Proverbs. I didn't know that.
Proverbs is a good book here to really go back. There's 31 chapters, like Marty said. I would encourage you to continue reading those. We are going to continue this on Wednesday night on Proverbs. I was going to try to get to the anger, the high road to sin, but I'll just say a few things here about anger and angry people. Do you like being around an angry person? I think we could all say no. But yet, as humans, there are times when we will be angry. Remember the scripture says, be ye angry and sin not. It's okay to be angry. It's how you use anger, whether it's sin or not. There are examples of Christ and Moses. Let me back up here. There's an example here. Moses intercedes for Israel shortly after the people had made a golden calf and God's mind was to destroy them. God was angry. Here's his people that made a golden calf, worshiped it, had another god before him. He wanted to destroy it. And Joshua warns to Israel in his farewell address that God's anger will kindle against you if you serve other gods. But there's some compassion about anger. We talked about Christ being angry once and not sinning. And I'm not going to be able to get into that. But if you'll look in Matthew 21, 12 through 14, and Mark 3, 1 through 6. There's two examples of Christ being angry there. And one of those situations is he's angry, and it was looked upon as zeal for the house of God. In other words, it was not bitterness and wrath. I'm doing this for God. But Anger is not only directed to others, but it's like a boomerang. It always comes back. If a man shows kindness, he will receive kindness. If a man shows anger, you're going to receive anger. And I won't have enough time to go into that right now. But I do appreciate your comments and listening to me.